Welcome, everybody, to the Space Camp Podcast. I'm your host, Torsten, with my co-host, Kyle. And today we have a special guest who you might have heard before. Good old Soren coming back to give us some commentary on a particular podcast or situation in the business tech world. And then we're going to be jumping into a quote, a couple of other things. Kyle, do you want to add anything as far as the agenda?
Yeah, I just want everyone to note that Soren was the host or co-host of our fourth most popular podcast out of 8. So very, very high regarded.
It's a very dubious honor. How many listens did it get?
How many listens did that achieve?
We were at
13?
36 as it stands right now.
36. Wow.
That's pretty good.
That's impressive, Soren. So see kind of what caliber you bring to the table. That's why we asked you back. So one of the things, let's see here. I'm just going to jump into that weird quote that we found. So it goes, "Old George Will got it backward. Big Brother isn't watching. He's singing and dancing. He's pulling the rabbits out of a hat. Big Brother's busy holding your attention every moment you're awake. He's making sure you're always distracted. He's making sure you're fully absorbed." Do you know who said that, Soren?
I have it right in front of me. Chuck Palahniuk.
I was going to see if you...
I'm a genius.
I was going to see if you're going to butcher the last name. Palahniuk.
I thought it was Palakanuk. It's got a silent K.
Why'd you pronounce
That would be his style. I used to read a lot of his stuff. What is that from, like Fight Club?
Yeah, he wrote Fight Club. Have you ever read Pygmy?
No, I haven't.
It's an excellent book. Would highly recommend it.
What have you
read?
Like
Rant, like the oral history of the serial killer. What else? Haunted. It was like this series of like short stories that were like really disturbing. He's an interesting writer.
What's the most disturbing story that he wrote? Do you know offhand? Can you remember one of them?
One of them was like this guy who was like in a pool, and I think like he had discovered like if you like a pool in the back of a house, and I think he had discovered that online or something like that you can, if you get naked and you put like your butt up against the way like where the propulsion where like the water's being filtered in and out, you can get like this like really really like positive like sexual feeling.
Oh wow!
And then I think.
Are you sure this was Chuck Palahniuk, or was this?
No, this is just
this is my diary
from Fight Club.
Yeah, this is reading directly from there, and then he gets stuck down there. And then it just like rips out, I guess, his like insides.
Oh,
if I'm remembering correctly, it was along those lines. It's very, very. It's a nice way to start out the podcast.
But no, that's the thing about Chuck's writing is he's always super visceral.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the main things in the Pygmy that I appreciated was Pygmy was about like a Russian sleeper agent that was here in the United States, and the way that he was so in depth in describing like the physical surroundings. Because this guy was like supposed to be hyper aware, like he would shake someone's hand. It was awesome. And he's just like, I could tell this guy's got like 22% body fat. He hasn't lifted weights in probably 6 months, but he tries to get to the gym occasionally. And he's like, I could kill him in like 2 seconds.
That's almost like a Jason Bourne type of thing. Like I can tell you where the nearest gun is placed. I can tell you, how fast I can run a quarter mile without slowing down at all.
That's not very impressive.
A quarter mile? Like a full on?
That's
like
one
a
lap of the track. Yeah.
I guarantee you can't sprint a 400 without slowing down.
Well, I just start slow and then never go fast.
Well, I don't think
just maintain your speed.
Just jog.
I don't think that's what he's getting at. You start at a slow pace and you 2 minutes later you're at the end of your 400.
You've never slowed down, not even once.
Not even once. It's physically impossible to slow down.
Anyway, enough of the digressions of Soren's fantasy diary and And Kyle thinking he can run a fast 400 in 2 minutes.
You're putting words in my mouth.
There are a lot of
Fake news.
fantasies.
You are exactly what Chuck is saying is wrong with the world. You're putting words in my mouth, and it's fake news, Torsten.
Well, sometimes you need a little bit of that, right? But in this instance, his point is that there's too much of it, right?
Yeah, that Big Brother doesn't need to. The way I see it is, and it's pretty true when you look at like the current political and media, I guess, driven circus that the news is today.
So, did you know that the NSA, they're storing an insane amount of data in Utah, but I think they just recently had to do a big dump of it because they had so much and they just couldn't really use it all. So I wonder if they actually dispose of that or if they just, put it in some other deeper file so that they can continue holding on to those important files of Kyle recording weird stuff at night. In his bedroom with his cat.
Like, that they're keeping a ton of data on you because if you get arrested or anything, they can bring up your texts from like forever ago, right? And they just have all that stuff because that takes up.
Really?
Yeah, it takes up like no space.
I thought you needed a warrant to actually have that.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is it's there. Like if they can get a warrant, which isn't probably a hard thing to do if you find the right judge, then they can just take that from your like AT&T or whatever. They have all that stuff stored.
That's scary.
What's really scary now is I can go on my new Pixel phone and I can search for any word and it will go through all my texts, even ones that are archived off my phone, and it will show me about it. Like show me the entire text.
So it just stores all of that information too.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. All your information's being stored. But I think what this quote is trying to say is that, so like in the George Orwell, like let's say 1984, Big Brother they were there, but they were kind of working like the stuff that really affected your life was in the background, like them tracking your heart rate through the TV and all that stuff. But they're saying, I think what Chuck is trying to say here is that that's not even necessary, especially like recently, because all they want to do is keep you distracted so you don't take a second to think about all the rights that are being infringed.
Yeah. How do you think that the government is actually playing a hand in that? Do you think that they're in cahoots with big tech to make that happen?
Well, I wouldn't even say it's big tech necessarily. I would say it's the media. I would say big tech, especially like some of the stories you hear from Google working with China, they're still kind of working in the shadows and you don't really know about the stuff that they're tracking. But I think with Big Brother working directly with the media to keep you distracted is to have everybody focusing on issues that don't really matter versus really important issues like the government continuing to seize extra control.
Yeah. So you think that they're actively working to continue to gain ground with the public by furthering their own agenda? So if they wanted to go to the Middle East, they distract us with other stuff so that when Democrats and Republicans kind of come together, they're just kind of discussing stuff that maybe isn't as important, and they're not looking at, some foreign policy and going abroad and starting all these wars.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that like all the stuff that we've been talking, like let's look at Donald Trump in this past week. What is his major thing that he's been doing? Is ragging on John McCain. Mm-hmm. Is that something that's important at all?
Is he still back on that? Because I thought he did that a while back ago.
He did, but he's back on it.
He's back on it because it's a distraction, I think. The Mueller report is probably coming out soon, and he wants to get the talk out of everything that's happening with his lawyer and everybody around him. So he's talking about John McCain and completely changing what we're talking about, the Overton window.
Well, it's hard. Like if you're a journalist and I work at like a news organization, not like representing them on this podcast, but like, it's the president of the United States. What he says is like news, right? But it's like the difference between reporting something and doing something, digging into it. It's just like a real challenge. I think a lot of reporters are having this like existential crisis about, do we report everything that he says? Is it like a right thing to do?
Well, I think it's good.
That's a conversation that's happening in these journalistic outputs.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are thinking about it. I think it definitely it varies by news organization and by things, and there's definitely ones who are profiting off of it, because a lot of news organizations have seen like large bumps in traffic because of it's like the Trump bump. You get more inventory, and that can sell more ads, and it can sell all kinds of things for your audience. So it's like it's a hard line to get, I think. But yeah, definitely he is a master of distraction, I think.
Yeah, the master, especially when you address him with important issues. He can easily change the subject. In the past, politicians have been much more tactful in their approach, but he is just kind of this kind of in your face type of approach, and will make fun of you and just kind of completely gets away from the subject, which is wild that is tolerated.
Do you think that that's like really easy for anyone to do, though, just given the nature of news? So there's this really good article on Quillette. I don't know how you feel about them. That sometimes they've gotten painted in a alt-right type thing. I haven't really seen it, but there was a really good article they had on news, and the quote that really stuck out to me is, "What you see each night or read each day from these all news radio stations is not in fact your world. It's a negative image of your world in both the photographic and tonal senses, because nobody will report on dog bites man. They will only report on man bites dog."
Yeah, I mean it sounds like something that's similar.
It's like
the quote in this trying to hold your attention by putting forward stuff that will get you to kind of the clickbait stuff. Someone got bit by a dog, someone didn't get bit by a dog. Which one are you going to click on if you're
if there's a link that says a dog bites a person, that's something you kind of expect, but you're going to click on the one that says man bites dog. You won't guess why.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of our worst inclinations there. And I think like what's interesting to me about this quote too isn't necessarily like it's government that's watching you, but I think that's a very valid kind of point. But it's this interesting shift that we've had over the last like 10, 20, 30 years where people are willingly giving away all their information online. Like the rise of Facebook and Instagram, and people are everyone's willingly recording just like everything about themselves.
I mean, even us right now, we're willingly putting our thoughts on the internet for anybody.
But our thoughts are super valuable, Kyle. That's the difference.
But I think
people will pay lots of money for these thoughts. They're not yet, but they will.
Well, we get $1, actually they do. We get a penny and a half for every single person that listens to us. So
probably sponsored.
Wait, where's my 39 cents quarter 3/3 cut? I should get a little cut of that.
Well, we can send you the 0.39 cents at a later time, but we won't say when. No, but like in terms of this, I think this is important just to have a conversation, and this, just because we wouldn't normally get on here and just talk like this. So it's interesting to share ideas, and then in a recorded matter, you're kind of thinking about what you're saying and being a little bit more thoughtful, instead of just having a 10-minute conversation that doesn't lead to too much insight anywhere, and you click off and you begin watching TV at home like you normally do, Soren.
Every night. Well, it's like, how do you live your life in a meaningful way where like it's like the signal and noise, all the noise of all the stuff that's always around you, and all the information that you have, it's just constantly growing, and the news and just like everything is just constantly being hit at you always. And I think phones too are a really interesting dynamic, the change in like how people we were at dinner last night, and just like almost half of the tables, everyone had like their phones on the table because it's like, oh, like the phone is more important than like the people I'm with.
Yeah, that's nuts.
That's such a frustrating thing when you're with someone and then like they're just on the phone.
Yeah, I went on like a date like a couple of years ago before I got married to my wife.
Good
like,
save there.
Yeah, last week. And it was like a first date like on OkCupid or one of these like one of these free online sites, and the girl just like spends like the whole time just like looking at her phone, and it's just like incredibly bad.
I would say that's your fault though, right? You keep your attention.
No, I don't think so. I think that's just well, no, because you could definitely say that like James Bond going on a date, they're probably not going to be on your phone, but none of us are James Bond. But
no, I feel I'm a modern day James Bond.
Modern day James Bond. So what you're saying is that you look exactly like Daniel Craig, a lumpy potato.
I'm a Sean Connery classic.
Well, that's not exactly modern day. No, so what I was saying is I think that feeds it, like the dating culture now, or even recently, feeds into this whole cell phone culture and being always connected and never having to be bored, where these girls probably go on 3-4 dates a week, right? Because it's so available.
I've heard a lot of people who go on dates to get like a free meal. There was like this like Reddit post. I don't know if it was doctored or not, but like just this girl in like New York City who asked this guy like, "Oh, let's go to dinner." The guy's like, "Okay, yeah, where we go?" And she chooses like this like fancy like 4-star restaurant that it's like $250 for like a minimum for whatever you pay for your dinner.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, you'll pay?" And he's like, "No, like we don't know each other, so we'll split the bill." Like that totally makes sense to me.
Wait, did she say you'll pay before they got to the restaurant? Like,
yeah, like in the Tinder, it was in the Tinder app. She was like, "You'll pay?" ?
That's a red flag immediately.
Especially, yeah. Let's go on a date. You're gonna pay though, right?
But it's like this weird culture, like you were saying, Kyle, about like the choice. I read Aziz Ansari wrote that book called. Have you heard of this? Called Modern Love.
No.
And he wrote it with this like sociologist, and basically Aziz added like this comedy element, but the sociologist had like the data background about it. And it is like when you live in big cities like New York City or Chicago or Milwaukee or different areas or Denver, you become choosier when you have all this opportunity right in front of you on these apps. And there's people who like look at it like a single picture of someone and they're like, "Oh, I don't like the shoes that he's wearing. Those are like awful shoes. Nope."
Yeah.
Swipe left. And it's just like, what world are we living in where you're just like so... And I guess it goes back to the quote, like you're so fully absorbed maybe in yourself.
Yeah, because you can fill your day with, the constant bits of media just in your own world by doing all the different snaps you can do and all the different Instagram and Facebook shots.
Yeah.
It's just never
like, have you ever gone like outside and there's people who'd spend like 20 minutes crafting a photo?
That's nuts. Luckily, that's not a very common thing in Milwaukee, but I bet you on the West Coast, it's probably much.
Oh, in New York City, it was super common. It's. I haven't seen as much here, but in New York, it was super common. Like especially at.
I don't think that's such a bad thing. I mean, like you just got to get a good shot.
I mean, if that's the thing. If that's what you're interested in, more power to you. But that you're probably not a person that I would be interested in hanging out with.
That's why you don't go on very many Tinder dates.
Well, yeah, true.
Well, I think I wonder because there's always been studies that show like as your social media time spent increases, usually your depression levels increase and your satisfaction with life decrease. And I think that's only going to become more and more prevalent because people broadcast the best side of themselves, right? You get like your photo and you're like, "Oh yeah, I look a little bit fat in that," or I don't like that photo. I'm having the best life, even if you're like kind of depressed or you're not having the best job or whatever.
Well, no,
don't broadcast that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like no one's like broadcasting them sitting at a desk for 8 hours. They're broadcasting
live for Kyle. This is
Kyle's new
stream
using Excel. Yeah, no, Kyle on
Wait,
the
he's
Bloomberg
updating
terminal.
himself.
Yeah.
Oh wow, he has 2 viewers now after 7 months.
Oh, look, he's
That's
using,
100% growth, Torsten.
he's using macros, man. That's he's
Not
living
bad.
his best life right now.
Pivot tables. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yes.
would argue that just the pure it's all this surface level crap, and so just by doing this repetitively, the act of putting your best picture out there, you're kind of creating a mask, of yourself, and you're not being truly authentic. But I would also say that in your personal relationships too, you're less inclined to be real with people. You try and just talk about how, all the good stuff that's going on, which is not a bad thing to have a conversation like that. But then you kind of lose a little bit of the humanity side of things and kind of the realness of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're making up this thing about yourself.
No, yeah, it's definitely a mask, and that's I think the thing that is why it's so depressing is you are on. Let's say you're on these social media sites, and you're just constantly seeing everyone else's mask, and you're looking at your own life, saying, "My life's. I'm not going to the Philippines every other week. I'm not doing all this crazy stuff. I'm sitting here and I'm eating ground beef and broccoli for the 5th time this week. Like
I'm going in a pool and sticking my butt into the propeller ocean every day.
Well, I mean, that does sound like you're living your best life.
Yeah.
Man, he looks like he's really enjoying that. We
He
should
just
try
loves
that.
it.
But yeah, I think that kind of
That's what-
dovetails. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking but the other side of it is like, yeah, it sucks and everything, but then it's like people, you just get addicted to posting stuff because you get that momentary rush of like people liking you, and it's like a human thing to want people to like your stuff and like you, and like when you get like 5 likes or 100, even our mom, right, Torsten? Like our mom really is obsessed with like likes on Facebook posts.
I think the older generations too are kind of getting caught up in this because, like, I think a lot of the older generations are like really into Facebook.
Do you think that's because they actually know like how many people even 100 people actually is?
I don't know what you mean by that.
So like if you get 50 likes on your Facebook picture, that's crazy if you think about it. There's 50 other people in this world that saw this and decided to push the little like button. Which if that was like in person, that would be overwhelming.
Getting like high fives instead. Like, oh, nice job, dude. Sweet picture.
Yeah, you'd feel like
or
the biggest
sweet-
boss
sweet-
in the world.
Sweet pose, dude. If I get like
Exactly.
50 dudes who are like, sweet pose, man, I'm like, what the heck?
You know, you'd be feeling
on?
awesome. But like that's the other
Wow.
thing. Our generation doesn't interact with people as much. I think there's a lot less sense of community with people who aren't the boomer generation, people underneath that, just the internet generation that like you see thousands or hundreds and it doesn't really mean anything to you.
That reminded me of that It's Always Sunny, where Mac puts the Craigslist ad for looking for friends.
With
Just
that
looking for
bicep.
What's that?
When he prints out the flyers, that one?
Of the bicep? Yeah.
Yeah. It just looks
That
like
looks
a
like-
penis.
Yeah. They're just looking for some really cool, strong, attractive guys to hang out with, and, to party and have a great time. Just, good guys. And then they get like a huge gay bar, like following to show up at their bar.
Oh man.
That's such a good show. I love that show.
That's definitely top 5 of all time.
Are they still going?
I think they have a final, at least another season that they had this year.
Is it odd that the only person that really has been very successful outside of that show is Charlie?
Well, Dennis too. I mean,
Yeah, Dennis had that show, AP Bio, right?
Well, yeah, but one show where Charlie's been in a bunch of movies.
Yeah.
I
would say Charlie's by far the most successful. Well, I mean, Danny DeVito, but
know.
Well, yeah, but Danny DeVito came in after.
he was already
talking-
established.
Yeah.
And made the show even bigger. Yeah. I don't think so because I think it makes sense. He's probably one of the funniest characters and just such a clown.
Yeah, and he kind of
Charlie is a
plays
great
like a
character.
similar thing in all of his other like movie and
Yeah,
show.
just his voice. His voice is so funny.
I don't know.
Sounds like your cat.
Yeah, exactly.
You should talk in that voice for the rest of the podcast.
I don't know. Yeah, it's that's a great show. But I think what we're kind of talking about here kind of plays right into our topic of today's podcast, which is the Theranos debacle.
And I think, well, it's interesting how you get people wanting to show up a certain way. You get people who, you know, put these images on their social media, then they want to have the best representative pictures of themselves.
Yeah.
And then you have a case like Theranos. You know, what is it? Was it a $10 billion company?
Yeah, multi-billion.
Yeah.
Or a multi-billion dollar company that purported to create a small medical device that could or maybe not necessarily a small medical device, but a medical device that could easily test all the normal stuff that would go into a standard blood test where they need a lot more blood. And they could do that based on this simple test that would take one blood drop.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be a massive fraud. But what's interesting is how it took form. And it definitely started off with someone being very representing someone who they were not.
Like so there's like a bunch of content that's being developed for this. So there's originally it's the book Bad Blood that came out, which is this journalist John Carreyrou from Wall Street Journal, who did this huge investigative report basically saying like, oh, this is a fraud. His story. And then there's like a podcast that came out. And then there's this documentary, The Inventor, that just went out on HBO. There's just like a lot of content that's being produced around this. And it's just like this classic like Silicon Valley story about someone who's like completely subverting the whole industry. And Elizabeth Holmes, like modeled herself after like her idol was Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And she wore like those turtlenecks like him.
Copied the turtlenecks, and everybody bought into it. You know, the media loved her. This woman who is incredibly successful, doing great things for the industry, inspired tons of people.
Well, I think it just played into their narratives, right? That they wanted to happen. They wanted a successful female billionaire entrepreneur to happen. So she kind of fell into that because that's where the prevailing narrative was headed, right?
Mm-hmm. I think she's super. I think she's very smart, and like she's like people are saying like she's like just like incredible. She's like fluent in Chinese. Like she's just like very very smart individual in like high school and dropped out of Stanford. Like really connected with these high influential people. She got one of like the Stanford professors to be on her team, and then she got like these high level people to be involved in the board. So you had people like Henry Kissinger, and like George Shultz.
How old was Henry Kissinger during it? Was he like?
That's another thing. Is like it's all old white people, old like old men who don't have any expertise in like biotech or like biology at all.
Yeah,
I think that was kind of so. This girl growing up, like one of the quotes she said was like, I've never been told like I couldn't do something. Like I've always had people say like you can do anything, whatever. And it almost seemed like she's always been told she's special and never really was challenged on any of her ideas. So when she started to fail, I think that's why she started to double down, and she had to prove everyone else right. You know, like she's like that's one of the issues I think with how we raise kids now and saying everyone's special. You're one of the special people. You're smarter than everyone else. Better than everyone else.
Curious about that though, because she was born, you know, in the 80s.
Yeah, very wealthy family.
And when she was in high school, she competed in athletics, and you know she wasn't the greatest. So there was an understanding of that. You know, there's an understanding in terms, and maybe on the athletic side, maybe she excelled in school and everything was not number one in all this stuff.
Well, that's what it seemed like, because one of her friends said she shut down interpersonally in high school and just spent all of her time in books.
I think one of the most telling things about her is that whoever her uncle or whatever asked her the question, when she was like 8 years old or something, what do you want to be when you grow up? And her answer, a billionaire. And they're like, well, why do you
want to be the president? Well, yeah. And she's like, well, if I'm a billionaire, the president will marry me.
Yeah. And so I think there was a little bit of a OCD or obsession with money.
Well, it's like, it goes back to the quote, I think, too, is if you're so involved, there's so many people who wanted this to happen. And like you're saying, Kyle, it's like this like young female entrepreneur. People are like, yes, like finally we're not getting this like all these males, all these things. Like there's just like this movement for it. And she's like a very photogenic person. So like it's like a love story for the media. Like it's a really interesting story. And she's like 19 when she founds this company.
Yeah.
And like you have like Bill Clinton, you have Joe Biden, you have all these people who are just like fawn over her. But on the other side of it, it's like they attacked everything like legally. They said everything was trade secrets. So like if you're a journalist and you're trying to find out all this stuff about this person, and like even in like the documentary and the podcast, they talk about her like big breakthrough was this cover on Fortune magazine. And she had this like front page cover and kind of like just like did everything for her. And the journalist there, it just like is beating himself to death about this. And he's like, I took some leaps in some areas, but I thought this was the thing because
like, you trusted them.
So yeah, you should trusted them. And what is
how do you
verify a proprietary technology?
Yeah, and that goes back to that. Just in term, it's to a certain extent, a journalist, they're supposed to do their due diligence. On the other hand, you think that you are doing your due diligence by talking to the number one person and asking these questions, and you think that obvious that this person is being truthful.
Yeah,
that's the important thing about these investigative journalists. Like this guy from the Wall Street Journal who popped up and, despite all the threats, was still willing to go forward because he had an ironclad argument, which is super badass that he did that.
Yeah, and it was like all these employees were like, "Oh my god, is she going to get away with this?" But you try and believe in this thing, and she's so adamantly just like, "This is going to work. This is what we have." And she got deals with like big, like just like wedged her way into like Walgreens and talked with like Safeway and like CVS, just like, and pried like what I think she was a very genius at like business, is prying into these competitors and being like, oh, we have this like amazing thing that will do this thing for you, and your competitor is very interested in us. Will you buy it without even checking in anything? And they're like, yeah, of course, because we don't want to miss out on like the next Facebook or next Google or the next thing.
But that's what was really interesting about that guy from Walgreens is he was like one of the guys that seemed like was trying to do his due diligence, like the purchasing manager or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was great.
Yeah, and they tried to bring him out to the areas, and they said like first of all they were escorted from the second.
So this was one of the purchasing or the guys behind Walgreens who goes and he checks the efficacy of a new idea, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, basically.
He goes in and apparently tell more.
I was going to say, apparently his family, his grandfather they had a small New York chain of pharmacies, and he said it was funny that like his family or his grandpa worked at a small pharmacy, his dad opened a second one, and then he ended up working just a few years later after he graduated and had a little bit of experience, ended up working at the largest pharmacy in the United States, which is Walgreens. But yeah, so he was like the due diligence guy, and they brought him out to what was that, Palo Alto out there, and tried to give him a tour of the facility. And he said he was escorted from the time he walked in. If he wanted to go to the bathroom, Sonny, the COO, I believe, followed these
main guys within the company. Ramesh,
basically the number 2 guy. Yeah. The number 2 guy would follow him to the bathroom, stand outside the bathroom, and then when he got back, would escort him back. And then his question was, hey, when are we going to go see the labs? And they're like, oh, we'll do it after lunch, don't worry. And then after lunch, they just ignored it. And he never got to see anything. So I think just a little bit of due diligence could have prevented a lot of this stuff to happen.
Well, the thing is, that guy was trying to do his due diligence. And what I would say about that guy is that guy speaks to having a very solid character, because at the end, he's like, you know what, I can't stand behind this. And he removed himself. He separated himself, saying that I couldn't do my full due diligence, and left Walgreens, or was not associated with the acquisition.
He left Walgreens. And his wife even said, hey, when are you going to admit that you were, because it was like 3 years later and Theranos was still a thing. And he was just like, I'm going to take it to my grave. And I couldn't live with the lack of transparency, basically.
Yeah. So I think those are the people that really stand out, and the people that you want on your team. And it's interesting how they initially had that Apple guy, that one of the Steve Jobs number 2 guy. And the Apple guy asked a ton of questions, and Elizabeth Holmes could not answer those questions. And it got to a point where he was asked to step aside by bigger people within the board. And he was just kind of, astounded how they couldn't answer these questions, and how Elizabeth was very good at deferring and dodging the questions. But I think those people are so important, where, and I think that goes back to first principles thinking. I think that first principles thinking, where you really want to understand something and get a true, I think Kyle left. You want to get a true understanding of what's going on with a particular idea, kind of like the Socratic method of questioning. And so instead of like, Henry Kissinger's involved, and this guy's involved, and this guy's involved, it's like, okay, but what are we dealing with? And I think a lot of times, going back to the quote, you're so inundated by information that you lose touch with just a pragmatic approach to understanding.
Yeah, and it's like the greed, human nature is like, you want to be involved with the thing, and you're like, wow, it's gonna completely change this whole industry, and I want to be involved with it. Is that Kyle?
I think he's flushing the toilet in the background. He just walks away without saying anything. I'm bored, and it leaves.
He goes to the bathroom.
You guys didn't read the chat?
We did. Be right back. Continue combo. It was the most awkward thing ever.
We heard a big flush in the background.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Nice work, Kyle.
I was trying to think like how Joe Rogan does it, where like a guy can just continue.
This isn't Joe Rogan's podcast, Kyle.
Well, I mean, that's like pretty obvious now. So, so where were you guys right before I sidetracked you?
We were just talking about how you were ruining the moment. So we were just going back to the idea how you have these individuals who directly contradict the flow of the organization, the secrecy, trying to attack that, trying to come up with questions that understand what the heck is going on, and just linking it back to that idea of the first principles. You have to truly understand something, and that when you're working with something like this, the secrecy just completely prevents you from understanding the fraud that was going on, and how she just created this intimidation atmosphere that prevented people from thinking creatively and getting together and collaborating.
Yeah, so not even just that.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is that you have someone who ostensibly wants to do an incredible amount of good for the world, but they create this culture of tearing everybody back who goes against you. And that's why I think she will get convicted for the maximum penalty, or that she should be.
Well, see, that's the thing. I think I don't even buy for the fact that she wanted like her number one goal was to do good for the world. I think that was an ancillary goal. I think, as she said when she was a kid, her goal was to get rich and famous. And that's exactly what happened. And it kind of was proven by her behavior once she did start becoming famous. She had all this armed security around and kind of just like made herself seem super important. And there was this one time she was speaking at a conference, and this very esteemed PhD left her purse in the green room. And she, even though she wasn't in there, she didn't let the person come in to grab her purse until an hour later when she was completely gone.
Why not?
Well, who knows? That's what the lady was like, who person? Like, why? I can't come in and grab my purse real quick. I have to wait around for an hour. And this was a person that was like highly esteemed in the community.
Huh. No, it's a little bit
Yeah,
odd.
The security was crazy within the whole organization.
But going back to what you're saying about kind of the trying to like knock down the dissidents, I think that's a sign of an unhealthy organization just in general. If you just want a bunch of yes men around you and you refuse to like answer any questions about your arguments that you're putting forward, I mean, that should be a gigantic red flag immediately, right?
Yes, Kyle, that's a really great answer.
Well, no, because it seemed like every single person that tried to say anything would be fired on the spot.
Yeah, instantly. Just like if you questioned her, you'd just be gone. People like the council, like even the legal team would switch over. And I think the genius move by her was to get David Boies, like this very famous legal attorney in Silicon Valley.
Oh yeah.
To like giving him and his legal team stocks and ownership of the company as payment to get involved. I feel like these legal teams are just like, I don't know how you could live your life and think that I'm doing something good when you're doing this kind of stuff. You're just going after people.
Yeah,
you're protecting a company who's committing fraud.
Yeah, and then you just have to do it in like a sly enough way that if something goes wrong, you still get paid, but you don't get indicted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like they just like skim off the top and then they get away with it, and like nobody's really talking about that legal team. I feel like
it's interesting how her friend portrayed her, in high school as this really sweet person and having this high voice and, pleasant, but a little bit socially removed.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, when she takes on this role, she wants to become more Steve Jobs-like, wearing the clothes. And then all of a sudden, she takes on this deeper voice too, which is really weird.
I think that was the most absurd part about her, was especially with how unnatural it sounded. Because we've heard people who have deeper voices than usual, especially women. She sounded like your little
kind
brother.
of like the opposite of yours. You have like a really shrill voice, baritone.
Hey,
you're saying
say shrill? That's sexist. No, but it's kind of like when you talk to your little brother on the phone when they're younger and they're trying to sound tough, so they deepen their voice and you can just tell because it's too breathy. You know what I mean?
That's how you sound in this podcast.
Well, yeah, but it just seems like it was so obviously fake.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Did you guys? So you guys listened to the podcast, right? I'm guessing.
I did. I didn't see the HBO series.
Did you see the HBO Sword?
Yeah, I watched everything. And they're going to make a movie about it. And you want to get... I think Torsten knows who the actress is who plays her.
Is it the girl from Lord of the Rings?
No, it's not her.
Or actually, do you know who I could see being it? Captain Marvel.
Oh, Brie Larson?
Yeah.
That'd be a good pick. With her blonde hair.
And she's similar in appearance, like facially. Either that or the girl from Westworld. The main blonde.
Oh, yeah.
She would be excellent, I think.
She'd be good. But it's... The real person is Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
I could see it. Isn't she a bit old? Oh no, Jennifer Lawrence. Never mind. I was thinking
what did you think about it? Documentary is pretty good.
HBO. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that I don't think it's great. I think it's okay. It is. It's interesting, and I like it gives like a little bit of context to like how the units like actually looked, and like interesting things like that. It's like these visuals that you don't get when you read the book or when you do the podcast. I think that it could have been like a longer series. Like I didn't really dive into like a lot of the interesting elements.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long was it in totality?
Like it was 2 hours.
Okay. Well, I mean, the podcast was, I think, 3 total, right?
Was it?
I think it was
Yeah.
6 like half-hour episodes.
Yeah, the podcast was pretty good. Like, yeah, they didn't even go into the voice on it. Just like really interesting tidbits. Yeah.
Did Jennifer Lawrence do the voice? Deeper voice?
No, that's the movie coming up.
This is the documentary.
Oh, okay. I thought the movie was out already.
No, the movie's like in the work by Adam McKay, and he's the guy who did like it was like the Big Short.
That was a great movie.
And he did, what was the movie he did recently? Vice.
Oh, did you see Vice?
Yeah, I love Vice. It's like one of my favorite movies. It's really good.
Yeah,
it's done in that style, like that very, very like kind of visceral style, and it's really, really funny.
Yeah, I'll have to peek. That's about
Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney, yeah, that'd be interesting for sure.
Yeah, so he's going to direct it. I think he'll do a really good job. I'm amazed at what he's done. Yeah.
What was I thinking of? So the movie. Well, my curiosity: will Elizabeth Holmes get money for the rights of the movie?
I don't think so, since she's like a public figure.
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't know.
That would be one of the reasons why I would not be excited to see this as a movie. But
since it's all like public record.
Yeah, because they're not selling you like a story that only they know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
And she didn't like author the book or anything like that.
So, what do you think about her punishment? You know, she's facing like 9 felony counts of fraud or something to that effect, and facing up to 20 years in prison. What do you think about that type of punishment? Let's say she gets the maximum 20 years.
Can I sell the case real quick?
Just relative to other things going on in our criminal justice system.
So just to put it in perspective, this was somebody who sold tests that were inaccurate to people seeking medical advice, and they made medical decisions based off of this faulty reporting, which could affect you barely anything or could affect you a lot. She refused to return stockholder money that wanted to turn in. There's that story of that old lady in retirement who gave $150,000 and then went to Theranos' headquarters and didn't or asked for her money back. Never got her investment back. Couldn't sell her shares, and is still sitting to this day saying that was the biggest mistake she's ever made. Given that, what do you think?
Are you flipping it to me or Soren? Why don't you go first?
Yeah,
it's so challenging because, like, on the podcast they had, who was that U.S. attorney Preet Bharara from like the New York South District, and he was saying like it's a tough case because you really got to prove that they willingly deceived people.
Yeah,
and it's like very challenging to do that, and it feels like completely wrong that someone who like sells like 20 years ago sold like marijuana and went to jail for like 20 years, like they could have the same sentence as someone like Elizabeth Holmes who deceived so many people.
Yeah, no, yeah, but I liked how that guy responded too, and he says like whenever anyone brings up like the what about of this other person, they would say, well, we'll focus on them later. Right now, we're focusing on this case.
What do you mean by that?
So, like, basically, like in easy terms, like if you were caught stealing from the cookie jar, and then your defense was, well, my brother stole one yesterday. Like he's like, well, we're dealing with you right now. We'll deal with your brother at a different time. So like because especially when it comes to the drugs, like I don't think anyone should be in jail for that ever, and I don't want that weighing on how much time they should have to do.
Well, I would agree there. However, I think that relatively, she should be put away for life, given how unfairly so many people have been treated. I think 20 years is incredibly light, given all of the other types of, for example, the weed, someone getting put away for just selling a little bit. So,
yeah, definitely.
It's in my opinion, she should go away for a lot longer. Yeah, I think Soren, you're saying that. Yeah, it's a very tough case, and you have to prove that they willingly deceive people. I think that kind of goes back to this culture of secrecy and firing people who want to speak out against the company, and intimidating people in order to prevent them from asking questions or finding out more, not letting doing the silo effect within the company, that these different factions can't talk to these different factions. The amount of intimidation they put onto that older, experienced scientist who ended.
He was so awful. Well, it's like it provides a trail, right? Because you're like, oh, this person.
Stop for a second. What do you mean he was awful?
No, it was awful. It was awful. The situation of him committing suicide,
he ended up killing himself. Yeah.
So what was the context of that? It was a very experienced scientist who truly wanted to do some good, and he had a lot of questions about how can we be putting this out into the public for actual tests when it is in reality not working.
Yeah, and he was subpoenaed. And he was like, the legal team was pressing on him to kind of lie, and he was like, I can't lie about this thing, and he was just like drinking heavily, and nobody was giving him any support, and like his wife was just saying like he was so stressed out about it.
And I think that's a perfect example to the amount of intimidation and malice, which I would argue is what they would need to show that there was this ill intent behind the founders of the company, the owners of the company, trying to promote this agenda and, striking down anybody that opposed them. I think there's where the malice comes in.
Yeah, but I don't know, like legally, does that make sense? And I feel like it's like a legal strategy for anybody who voices any kind of dissent and is like, oh, does this work? You fire them, and you're just like, I believed in this thing. And how do you prove that they didn't believe in it? Like, if she believed in it completely, 100%, my understanding from like the pre-argument from the podcast is that she cannot go to jail. Like, if they believed in this thing, even though it was wrong, they can't go to jail for it. And that's crazy to me.
So I think where legally they can get in trouble so it might come down to he said, she said, and whoever can prove themselves more reliable in front of the jury. But there were certain statements that they said while trying to sell their product, like this has been used on the front lines in the military applications, and trying to use that to gain trust, and other things kind of like that, where they've lied, but if they're not on record lying, then it's going to come down to he said, she said about this stuff.
Yeah, I think in the documentary they have like marketing materials from their, like, well, they had one of the generals, I think, who was on the board, like, it's like saying like, we're using this in the battlefield, which like in marketing materials, which is crazy.
I mean, that might be the stuff that digs their grave then.
Yeah, but they didn't like put it out. It was just like stuff they had like mocked up.
Yeah.
But how can you develop stuff like that and not be held like liable?
Well, I think the other place where they should be held liable was that this was being used to make medical decisions. I guess they can get away with saying this wasn't an FDA approved method and all this stuff because they were shipping it out or whatever. But it seems like there was multiple, at least dozens of people who used this test to diagnose themselves, and the diagnoses were completely inaccurate.
Yeah, it'd be like, you have syphilis, and you'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Which is like, normal for me every time I go for a blood test. But
yeah, you're like, well, I've never had sex before, so I don't know how that's possible.
Checkmate there.
Could you imagine being a virgin and getting a syphilis positive? You're just like,
how do I get that?
Yeah.
Well, you could probably be born with it.
Well, yeah, but like, if you were an adult having syphilis from when you were born, you probably would have died much earlier.
I don't know.
Well, it's like all these like levels. I think like in the book they go into different people, and they're like levels for things like, oh yeah, you're like diabetic.
Yeah.
You're like, oh fuck, like wouldn't that be like the worst thing ever? Like going for a blood test and be like, wow, you're like diabetic. Like you need to go on like medication right away.
Yeah, man. And then the thing is, once you go on that medication, you're basically diabetic for life because it makes you more insulin resistant. And I think the craziest story was the lady who had breast cancer and got her. She went through the surgeries, got her breast removed, all this stuff. She took one of these tests, and it said that her estrogen level was 300, which was like the level of like a 22-year-old woman, which is like a huge red flag to say like, oh, there might be another growth or cancerous mass in there. And then she went and had a normal test, and there was 0 estrogen, which is what she should have had.
Yeah. I think there's just my opinion, and I guess there's not too much credence behind it, but the amount of people that were deceived and how, there was an understanding from up top, because all of the information was filtered through these people, and they were told by many people who tried to speak out and who were fired, things aren't going right. So there was an understanding that things were not correct, and they continued to persevere despite putting people in harm's way.
Yeah, like this, the Sunny and her having a relationship with him,
Deceiving
and him having
investors,
him like his backstory is really interesting because I think like he was a product. According to the book, he was a product of like being at this. I forget what other company he was involved with.
Did you read the book?
Yeah, I read the book.
Okay.
So he was a big shot at like Microsoft, and he was a big programmer, right? That was his.
I don't know if it was Microsoft. Would you remember 100%? I don't remember.
I think it was Microsoft and another big company.
He made a bunch of money at a company. Like in the book, they made it seem like he was like just there at like the right time and the right place. Like he wasn't like a creator or anything like that. He was just there at the right time.
Yeah,
and he made a bunch of money at this, and that's the nature of Silicon Valley, right? If you make a bunch of money, people are like, oh fuck, like we're gonna come to you, and we're gonna give you this opportunity, and then it just like begets itself, rather than just like being really good at something. It's just I like all the guys who are like, oh yeah, I Facebook, and it's like the natural, I think, first principle question is like, what other companies did you invest in that were not Facebook?
Yeah, and yeah. Because did you get lucky this one time? So apparently, this Sunny guy, he originally worked for Lotus, which is like the original relational database, right? And then he worked at Microsoft.
He seems like the biggest tool out there. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had a Lamborghini whose license plate was Das Kapital, like the Communist Manifesto title. Like, come on.
I remember, like, wasn't there a story where he had like a samurai sword or like some kind of like Japanese stuff in the office, and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, like what's the story behind why you have this?" And he's like, "I don't know, it just looks cool."
It looks
cool. Like, fuck you, man.
Yeah, it's like some like super. It's probably like a super expensive set of samurai swords. He's like, "So what's the deal with that?" He's like, "I don't know, man. It looks awesome. Don't you think so?"
Like, yeah, just like someone who's like very surface level is not really into it. Just like, yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah. No, yeah. Just like above everything. Like I'm not gonna I'm not gonna be into the history of something. It just looks cool, man. Super surface level.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was the other license plate that he had in one of those other vanities? Where it was just like the Roman thing. I came, I saw, I conquered.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. And like
The
from what it seems like
was that Napoleon or who was that?
I think it was just like a Roman wasn't it just a Roman saying, or was it?
I think it was
someone use it
was
after?
like
Yeah,
one of
like
those Roman conquerors.
What would be your license plate? Thor?
Thor, mine.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably would just keep standard license plates. I don't think I need to be super ostentatious. But then again, maybe a bunch of money changes you, and you're like, when you're worth $300 million, you're like, I don't give a shit. I'm gonna buy 7 Lamborghinis, and all of them are gonna say "fuck off" or something dumb like that.
But that was the hilarious part, right? Like they're like, "Oh, we're so secretive," and like all this stuff. Like we're not gonna like show anyone anything. But then he drives this Lamborghini that has like these custom license plates to like the restaurant.
For, it's like Julius Caesar, it says Veni Vidi Vici, which is I came as I conquered. Oh,
man. Like, how does that not stick out?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in Palo Alto, and there's definitely like really nice cars, but like it sticks out.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to be a special kind of person to get a unique license plate in general.
Oh yeah, I think those are always the awful people.
Yeah. I wouldn't. There's funny ones out there.
Yeah, there's funny ones, but still, like, you're trying too hard, I think, man.
What's it in The Office, or one of the guys gets like WL hung? It's like well hung, but people are like, are you like a William Hung fan? From like American Idol?
Like the guy's a really bad singer.
Yeah, they're really awful singer.
Yeah, oh, that's funny.
Trying to find better license plates.
Well hung, yeah, that's a really good one.
What would your license plate be, Soren? If you were forced to get one, like someone's sticking a gun to your head right now, it's like you need to have a license plate and it needs to be unique. Go.
I mean, it'd be easy, just Soren. I feel like Soren is the easiest one.
It's like SOARIN with an apostrophe after it.
Can you?
Here's one.
I could do that.
Here's one.
Pretty awesome, actually.
MR space bait, Virginia.
Mr. Bait, Virginia.
Mr. Bait, Master Bait.
Or Jedi I am.
Are you looking up stuff?
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the good ones out there.
Jedi.
Super bad.
Super bad? That sounds pretty lame. What about RUB, the number 1 OUT?
That's a good one. So do you think with custom license plate and all, like, do you think that they actually believed in the company? Or do you think that it's just like like in the documentary, they make the point in the intro, and it's like this thesis for the whole documentary is that Thomas Edison, in his approach to like building out the incandescent light bulb, basically told investors, yes, I've made this incandescent light bulb. And he like stalled for like years to build this thing because he actually hadn't built this thing. He's telling them, I've built this thing. It's amazing. It's going to change everything. And they're like, yeah, we're going to invest in it. We're going to do this thing. And 4 years later, he finally builds it. Like, it's this process of telling people I've built this thing. And in the process, he's building it out for these 4 years. And he actually builds this thing. And I wonder if that's like the Silicon Valley kind of myth-making thing where it's like Steve Jobs, like you always hear these stories about them coming up to like the presentation of the software, of the release of the product, where they're like, it's coming up to the event where they're scrambling to make everything work. And it's like you kind of build the plane as you're flying it.
Yeah, fake it until you make it, right?
Yeah, so is that the Silicon Valley story? And is this just like this gone wrong? Like, is this just like she didn't have enough time to do it? You know, like that's like the interesting question to me.
I think it wasn't just that they didn't have enough time to do it. I think that it sounds like their science was wrong. This was a girl who dropped out of her like advanced level biology classes after freshman year. Originally thought that she could implant a device that would test you and administer drugs. And even when she was told that this was impossible because drugs aren't the inoculations aren't concentrated enough to fit inside of this tiny little device, that she's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway, and then dropped out. And then I think she swept up with everyone saying like, oh, you're a genius. You're so smart.
But like coming back to the Thomas Edison, don't you think there were people there who said, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You've not built this thing.
Yeah, and they fired
just
him
like proving them wrong. like it's like two different like Thomas Edison obviously like built this thing, and he was very, very like. I'm just curious if she would
have a track record.
Thomas Edison,
yeah, and I think that has a ton of value there, having a track record. And yes, that is a little bit inauthentic to say that you've done something already and then just push it off.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. Like, it's like crazy to draw those parallels, even though, he has that track record.
What did they name the device?
The incandescent light bulb?
No, the Edison.
Yeah.
So, I feel like they told you all the clues you needed. Like, that they weren't done with this yet, but people still wanted to invest. And I think that's the Silicon Valley fake it till you make it mindset. There's all this loose VC money flying around. If you're not the one grabbing it, someone else is going to.
Well, it's like, there's all these companies out there who have released this grand vision. I'm thinking of there's like that VR company who like they're like worth apparently like billions of dollars. And they've released like a couple like short things, and you just like don't even know what they're making.
Yeah, like the guys who originally were going to make the headset,
throwing money into this thing. I think it had like this one where like it could visualize. It's like augmented reality, so you could look out. It was like someone on like a ship, and they were looking out into like into the waters, and they were seeing the weather, and they're like, oh yeah, there's like a storm coming in like 2 hours. Because of like this augmented reality system, Magic Leap. That's what it's called, Magic Leap.
Oh, I've never heard of that. That sounds crazy.
And they can you should look them up. Like Magic Leap they have these amazing marketing videos, but they haven't like produced anything like a real product. And people put tons of money into it.
I think that's nuts. I think that kind of goes back to that fire video we discussed last time, where or the Fire Festival, where it's just like you can have the greatest presentation in the world, but let's look at your track record. This Fire Festival guy, the main guy who created it, what was his name? Do either of you remember?
Billy McFarland.
Billy McFarland, his track record was very poor. And so I think
like Billy McFarland and Elizabeth Holmes come together in like 10 years and create like the next biotech company that's going to just crash.
Yeah, that might not be. You might be right about that.
But do we ever learn anything? Does society ever learn anything?
Well, that's the thing. I think people always are obsessed with the story. If you can tell a good story, people will do anything. I mean, just look at like this. Like a few months ago, there was that lady who created a GoFundMe for a homeless man. She was like, this homeless man gave me his last $20, and he ended up raising like $500,000 for their GoFundMe, and it was completely fake. The story never happened. It was a scam because it was a good story.
Yeah. They just like pocketed the money, right?
Yeah, and they were buying BMWs, and then like the homeless guy's like, they didn't give me enough money, and like just terrible.
It's like you don't even have to like. And I remember in college we took like this course and like just like changing the narrative and stuff, and you don't even need to like doctor images, and they're doing stuff like on the WMDs in Iraq, and like they had images of that. It's like you just change the caption on things, and you can change the whole narrative of the story, that people see things in totally different ways. You take a picture and you just change the caption.
Well, just like a most recent example was those Covington kids, right? The people with the MAGA hats, the little kids, the 16-year-olds, and they were getting dragged through the coals being like, this is everything that's wrong with society, just because that's what the narrative was. Even though from all extents, it seems like they were just standing there.
Was that the one? What was happening with them?
So
that was the high school, or was that?
Yeah, the high school kids. And then apparently there was the Black Hebrew Israelites, which I don't know if you've ever had an interaction with those people.
No,
they are nuts, dude. Katie and I visited North Carolina once, and they were on a street corner. They're nuts. Like, they're actually nuts. You should look them up. They're insane people. And apparently they were standing there, and these people were the Black Hebrew Israelites they're basically, their whole thing is that Black people are the original Jews, and like the Jewish people now are imposters and evil. Like, they're psycho people. And
it's like what's that lizard people movement?
Yeah.
Where like everyone's a lizard.
Yeah, like everyone empowers a lizard. And like they look at like the digitalization of their eyes and stuff, and they're like
the QAnon and that stuff. People go through a wormhole.
All right, you want to close then with the random catchphrase generator?
So the random catchphrase generator is, let the maggot obtain sight of the rabbit. Soren, what does that mean to you?
Let the maggot obtain sight of the rabbit?
Let the maggot obtain sight of the rabbit.
Well,
is it kind of a redeeming thing? Some nasty little thing? It can grow and turn into a fly by...
So I guess the way
are you exposed to the world around you?
Yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it more of like wokeness, as like people say nowadays. Like, you're just a little maggot grub before you can get the hard sight and detail that the rabbit can see. So let's get as many people woke as possible so we can have them maintain or obtain the sight of the rabbit. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah. I'm confused I'm stumped on that one.
Really? I think it makes sense.
Let the maggot obtain sight of the rabbit. This would allow a maggot to be woke.
It would like let the maggot like be able to see things as the rabbit sees, as sharply as they do.
Let the maggot obtain sight of the rabbit. So it's like the vision of how the rabbit sees the world.
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, how does the maggot see the world, Torsten? Just tell us what you see.
I mean, there's a lot to you start off in this lowly state, which Soren, you can relate, and you begin to grow into your aspirations in life, and the maggot wants to grow into a fly. And I think there's a lot of parallels with a couple people on this podcast. So.
I think it's like the metamorphosis with Franz Kafka.
Turned into a fly.
You're turning into the maggot.
Well, on that note, thank you everybody for joining us. This was a very informative and constructive conversation, and hope you enjoyed, and will join us next time.
Until next time, everyone.
Te lo lavas.
Craig, leave.
Why is your name Craig on this?
Wait, time for an ad. Flipboard curates the world's stories so you can be smarter in your work, life, and play. Choose from thousands of topics to personalize Flipboard and get your latest stories from the best publishers and experts delivered to you 24/7. Used by millions of people every day, Flipboard is how people move themselves and the world forward. Get started now at flipboard.com. That is flipboard.com.
Yay!
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.